Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 8th edition of our Dealing with Brexit Open Conversations. Before I start, I'd like to remind you that captions are available if you need them. My name is Silvia Morelli. I am Project Communications Manager at Extrax, a Manchester-based development organization for outdoor arts. I'm a white woman in my mid-30s, have shoulder-length wavy brown hair, I wear glasses, and today I'm wearing a green shirt and a beige cardigan. I use the pronouns she, her. As a reminder, our Dealing with Brexit conversations are designed to offer an informal space to encourage information sharing between peers around touring post-Brexit. This event is supported by Arts Council England as part of Extract's ongoing work to support outdoor art professionals to continue to work internationally post-Brexit. You can find more Brexit resources on our website, and my colleague Irene will now put some links in the chat. Today, we're delighted to be joined by Ivan Thorley, Artistic Director and Producer for Puppets with Guts. Ivan will share his experience of taking the Lips to la Mercè Street Art Festival in Barcelona, in Spain, this past September. After hearing from Ivan, we will have about 20 minutes for a discussion together about some of the challenges that you might face and the questions that you might have. And again, this session is meant to be informal and to provide a supportive space for anyone with questions around career work post-Brexit. We might not have all the answers, but please feel free to jump in by raising your hand or by popping your questions in the chat if you don't feel comfortable coming in. Just a note that any advice given in this space should not be considered as legal advice, but more as a starting point for discussions. And now over to you, Ivan.
Great, thank you, Sylvia. My name is Ivan Thorley. I'm Artistic Director of Puppets with Guts. I'm a white male, middle-aged, with brown hair and greying beard, and I'm wearing a corduroy dark grey shirt today. So today I'm just going to talk really briefly about the sort of whole experience, or the whole picture, if you like, of taking work to La Mercè recently. Which the process of began maybe 2 years ago, actually, in terms of prepping for Brexit-related things. So I've got a presentation or some slides to play. So Sylvia, if you wouldn't mind. Okay, can everyone hear me okay? All right. So this presentation is loosely based around the impact of Brexit on touring. Next slide, please, Sylvia. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about who we are, what we're touring, key festival outcomes, the carnet, logistics, money, top tips, and then questions at the end, if possible. But please feel free to jump in if you do have any burning questions along the way. So Puppets with Guts is a big, bold outdoor puppetry company. We're based in Brighton and Hove. We make extraordinary big puppets, animating public spaces with spectacular shows. We perform in lots of different contexts, and we try to transform public spaces with our audacious and original style of performance. I've introduced myself. So next slide, please, Sylvia. So the Lips, if anyone hasn't seen the Lips, please get along to our next show. But the Lips are a luminous big puppet sing-along show with something to say. The Lips reanimate our favorite songs, celebrate our shared love of popular music, and uphold our freedom to speak out through a spectacular pop puppetry lip sync performance. Next slide, please. So what is it that we're actually touring? What are we trying to take to different places, and what were we taking to Le Mercè. So this is a quick design overview of what the lips are.
My name's Caroline. I'm the designer for Puppets with Guts, and I've designed the lips and the costumes. I've worked very closely with Ivan Thorley, our creative director. We've had a whole host of interesting people collaborating with us. Nick Barnes doing the mechanism. We've had Jonathan Hogg doing the lighting.
We sort of thought, well, wouldn't it be funny to see a pair of lips on their own singing songs?
I started by carving a bunch of different lips in styrofoam. So we then took patterns from those and blew them up.
6 or 7 times the size of these.
We then fitted those onto the mechanism which Nick was designing. So it was a lot of back and forth with different people. So the new lips incorporate a couple of new big design changes. We've added in an extra movement, so they not only open up and down now, but they go forwards and backwards, so they can really articulate. We've got daytime and nighttime lips now. So the nighttime lips are basically just Plastisode, white Plastisode with some basic shadow work on them, which means that the lights inside, which change colour, can show.
I worked on the electronic software and lighting design of the new lips. I was able to take the Plastisode cutting patterns of the lips from Caroline and the mechanism design from Nick to virtually construct the puppets in 3D software before they were made. I modelled how different placements of LED lighting would illuminate them as they moved, and then designed and constructed the control electronics in our studio. I then worked alongside Caroline and Ivan to wire up the lips and prototype the lighting designs.
The lighting can now be a variety of different colours and states, and we can do those slowly, or we can have them cycling through a whole rainbow. There's a whole load of LEDs in there, many more than we had before. They're really ping out now from the landscape, which is great. All these different brains sort of come together and make something really cool. I'm very pleased to be a part of it.
Okay, so that's the puppets mainly that we're touring, but the touring kit is the 3 puppets. We've got 2 LED screens, which, if you like, caption or subtitle the songs and the show. We have a black box, which is a sort of show control localized on the performance side, and then we have a bunch of other bits and bobs, tools, etc., that we take with us. So next slide, please. So all of that needed to be collated for the carnet. So we started by contacting Dynamic Docs, who are carnet experts, to begin the process of getting a carnet issued. This is the authorization letter that comes with the carnet, and I'll talk about this in a few slides. But next slide, please. So Dynamic Docs sent me back this spreadsheet, and basically we had to fill in each line with all of this detail. So a description of the item, the number of those pieces of items, its weight, and what unit that was in, its value, and the country of origin. And if it did have a little ID number on it, like a serial number or something like that, then we would include that in the spreadsheet. If it didn't really matter. So we had about 116 lines of different items listed on this spreadsheet, and a bit of back and forth to the carnet company for any clarifications. And all of that added up to around 59,000 quids worth of stuff. So next slide, please, Sylvia. So we then had a 12-month carnet issued for around 1,200 quid. And these were the sort of fees involved with that. The bond fee, which lasts for 12 months, we don't get that back. I'm not sure where that goes, but basically that covers us for the next 12 months. For the Le Mercè gig, the festival paid 1/3 of that, so we're hoping to recoup the other 2/3 of that cost over the next 12 months. So next slide, please. So on our way, when we first started talking about the Le Mercè gig, I raised the prospect of shared transport, and Le Mercè mentioned that there was another show going out, another UK show called Future Cargo. And so we met and chatted and realized that we could share transport, and we could put all the lips kit, if you like, onto the back of the Future Cargo truck, which is like a 40-meter shipping container. It was a 2,000-mile return trip, and we needed to export all of our stuff and re-import it. each company, we had our own carnet each, so you can have 2 carnets for one vehicle, if you like, or one mode of transport. And I think it was easier for each company just to get their own carnet issued to take the stuff out to the Mercè. So a couple of tips that I learned during this process, which I thought I'd share today, was when I was loading all the kit onto the truck on the side of the M25 near the M23, the lovely Neil from Stage Freight was driving the truck out to the Mercè. And basically, when the carnet is issued, we had these authorization letters, and the authorization letter had my name in it. But we needed an authorization letter for Neil as well. So within I had to sort of jump on the phone, ask the carnet company to issue another authorization letter, and then email that through. Neil, however, pointed out that when you go through the inland border facilities, it's always good to have a printed copy of that authorization letter, as well as all the carnet documents to give to officials at the border. So I think he managed to get through the border going out without a printed copy of his authorization letter. But I took then some out to Barcelona so he could bring those back with him. So just a top tip that the authorization letters, it's good to have copies of those. And yeah, going through the UK side, apparently it takes about 3 hours, and then going through the French inland border facilities, it takes around 30 minutes. So I'm not sure why, but that's roughly what Neil mentioned. So if you're planning a trip out, that's good to know. Next slide, please. So another thing that we had to, that was, is critical to the running of the show is our cast. So 2 or 3 months out, we sort of needed to have a cast in place to take out to Barcelona. And that was Elaine Hartley, Abigail Matthews, Larissa Pinkman, Olivia Bourne, and myself. And it's quite tricky to sort of ask performers to hold just a week of time or a couple of weeks of time out of many months, because they're all freelancers and stuff like that. So we're really lucky and thankful that our cast could hold that space for us and get all their paperwork together. So next slide, please. So, but in confirming our cast, we triple checked with each performer that they would be up for doing all the additional paperwork, which I think really helps manage their expectations. We also paid them for a day of rehearsal to get this paperwork together. So in the lead up to the gig, we asked everyone to check their passports, to check that they had 6 months left on their passport from the date of departure to the festival, and the number of days, and check the number of days they'd spent in any EU country during the past 12 months. A really key kind of thing that we did require was the A1 forms, or the proof of UK tax residency. The A1 forms, there's 3 different types of A1 forms, and I've been caught out by this a couple of times. So if this is really useful, because HMRC sent me back a letter with these different forms listed on it. So if you are self-employed, you do need to search for and fill in the 3837 form. If you're an employee, PAYE, you need to fill out the 3821 form. And if you have a company, you need an A1 form for your company, which is the 3822 form. Now, other people, there might be different arrangements with different organizations and people and subcontractors and all sorts of things. So it is a little bit tricky, but this is sort of how we approached it, and we managed to get through all the relevant A1 forms to go out to the Mercè. Next slide, please. The other thing, the other certificate that we needed was a temporary working in Spain certificate, or the NIE certificate, which now you can apply for those at the Spanish consulates in either Manchester, London, or Edinburgh. And you do an online application and email that through, but then you have to go in person to the consulate to submit the application form, provide ID, and pay the £8 fee. It's then valid for 6 months. The main cost involved with that actually is people's time and their travel expenses, which we covered for each of our touring parties. We then also asked everyone to obtain personal travel insurance and a global healthcare card, which is the old European healthcare card. We also were issued an invitation letter by Mercè, which was drafted by Extracts. Thank you, Extracts. And also, just to go through the border or airports in Spain, we needed a COVID vaccination pass or a negative COVID test before flight. The only documentation the festival did request was the A1 forms. Everything else they were not really that interested in at all. They just wanted to know about our tax residency. So that was the main form that we had. That was the only thing we submitted to them. And then we had a documentation folder with printed copies of all of those documents in it, just for, if we did get questioned at the border for any reason. Next slide. So money. Extracts kindly provided about 1,100 quids worth of contribution towards our overheads, which were about 1,750 in total for the activity. So for all this just additional, if you like, Brexit related paperwork, or dealing with third countries. So, however, in getting the carnet together and getting the show together, so we could present a really high quality show overseas, there's quite a lot of prep and time that needed to go into that. So one of those was production management, and I spent about 10 days having to go through all of our stuff, making sure it was all really well organized. So we were really clear, if we did go through the border, we knew where everything was and it was documented and labeled and stuff like that. Abby Reeve also did a lit review of all the sort of third country touring resources and recommended how best we deal with borders and third countries, but also how we deal with that internally with our performers and staff, if you like, the subcontractors. And that was really useful. We now have a folder on each country in the EU that we can kind of go to and look at documentation on each one, because every single country is different in terms of their requirements. The direct costs for just getting the show up and running, doing a bit of maintenance and making some improvements was about 2,234, plus remixing the sound for Catalan audiences was about 450. The lyric displays, we have to time code every single line of text, that's about 285, and the rehearsals were about 4625. So just in getting really well organized and prepped for Mercè, it was about 7,594, excluding company overheads and management time. So if I sort of add all of that, it loosely cost around 12,794 with an income of 8,000. So it's quite, I think you either have to do a lot, we needed to do triple the amount of work whilst out there to cover all of these costs. But, it seems to be a touring reality at the moment anyway. And then the Spanish tax, artists who work in Spain have to pay an international tax rate. So when we negotiated the fee, the festival then basically put 24% on top of our fee, which was then taken at source. We invoiced for the full amount, including that 24%, which was then deducted by the Spanish festival. I'm not quite sure what happens to that income in terms of tax in the UK, but I have asked my accountant and I'm hoping to get an answer at some point. Next slide, please. So what happened? So we went to Barcelona with the Lips, and these are just this is what we did. So we had 3 days of activity. We needed to deliver 8 Lips shows, including 2 daytime roving and 6 nighttime static shows. Some key outcomes were we recorded the voiceover elements in Catalan. We added in 2 songs for Catalan audiences, and we worked with a local pyro expert We presented the show on 2 different performance sites within an hour of each other, and we had an all-female cast, and apart from me. So to mitigate risk of going out to Barcelona, we worked really hard on lowering any production operational risks. So that was creating the black box, doing some maintenance on the lips, and making sure that we were really confident in those show systems. We took an extra performer with us to mitigate against sickness of COVID or other. And actually, I've been doing that more recently with all of our shows in the UK as well, and it just helps to really share the load and reduce my stress levels, if nothing else. Rehearsing the show in Brighton for 5 days beforehand was really useful, so we're just ready to roll, checking all our show systems, and just making some strategic improvements, including the black box, which localizes everything on the performance site. And allows us now to get the show onto site and off site within 15 minutes, which is so super useful. Once everything's set up, lights, PA, goalpost rigs, where we can really get the show in and off site really quickly, which I'm really happy about. Next slide, please. And so the audience response, which was fabulous. If you do the next slide, you'll see. Cool. Next slide, please. Or again.
Sorry, I got enthusiastic.
Cool. So we had a great time. We had so much fun out there. So we're really proud of the show we took out to Catalan, to Barcelona, sorry, re-recording the VO elements of the show into Catalan. I think was really helpful with audiences there, as well as adding in a couple of songs for Catalan audiences. As an organization, I think the activity helped us grow our confidence in touring high quality outdoor arts work overseas and third countries. And I think overall the simplicity, responsiveness and wide reach of the LIPS production thankfully supports us to overcome new touring realities. So next slide, please. So thank you to Arts Council England for their generous support, Extracts, Platform 4 UK, the Mercè Festival Barcelona, we love you. The team at Future Cargo and Stage Straight couldn't have done it without you, and Dynamic Docs are great. And also the Public Scouts creative team. Kiss, kiss, kiss. Thank you very much. So if anyone's got any questions, please feel free.
Thank you, Ivan. That was brilliant. And I loved seeing the videos as well. People clearly loved it. And I'm sure that helped your confidence, as you were saying, and made you want to tour again abroad, even if with all the challenges that you described.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm feeling much clearer and confident about those processes now. So it's good to get the first one done. Absolutely.
We have a question in the chat from Helen, who said, did the music rights cost a lot?
Very good question. We didn't get any music rights for that. So as far as I'm concerned, it's the responsibility of the host venue to provide those rights. And Le Mercè just sort of went, you know what, we'll just overlook that. So, but normally, yeah, that's something that we give those details of the songs to people beforehand, and it's up to the venue or presenting organisation to deal with that.
Another question, have you thought about setting up a base in the EU?
Absolutely, yeah. I was talking with another Europe-based company actually about potentially doing that, who also tour big puppets and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely am open to that and would be interested in exploring that. I don't think yeah, having a base in Europe would be super useful, but it, you know, it swings and roundabouts as well. We would need a lot more work over there to be based there and stuff. So but definitely interested in going in on something with a cohort of people or something. That would be really cool.
There were a few questions as well that people submitted when they registered for the session, which I will go through in a second, because I've just seen a raised hand from Tom from Motion House. Do you want to speak, Tom, or pop it in the chat as you prefer?
It would be great if I could ask a question. Thank you, I appreciate it. My question's about NIE numbers and the advice you were given. The way the way Motion House runs is that we don't use freelancers usually, but we have full-time employees. So they are employed in the UK, paid in the UK, and the income from a gig isn't assigned to pay them as such because they're an employee and that's a business investment. So I'm intrigued as to what advice you were given for NIE numbers, because as far as we're aware, the income we were making, we will be making, we have made from Spanish, from working in Spanish governance, is for the company and is not related to the income of the UK employees. Does that make sense? It's a bit complicated one.
So for the NIE certificates, it's only to be able to work there temporarily. I don't know that there was any relation to income or who was generating any income. It's whether I remember seeing a Zoom a year or so ago with an orchestra's person who extracts presented, which was really useful. But I don't think it has any. I think the A1 forms probably are more related to that than the NIE forms. The NIE is just literally an ID number, so they sort of know you're in the country or know you're going to be working there, basically. A lot of people have sort of said you don't actually need to get them, but we were being super safe and super cautious about going out, and now they've made a change where you can actually get the NIE numbers from the consulates, because previously you had to go to a Spanish police station to get them, and the Spanish police officers weren't necessarily very interested in issuing those to a whole orchestra or to people asking for them. So that's definitely a useful change, but I don't think it's got anything. I wasn't aware of anything had anything to do with income or money.
We'd gone to Spain to do a gig, and we were trying to follow the police going to a police station, the nearest police station on arrival, and from hearing from people going and sorry, just find my words.
Right.
The police going, we have no idea what you're talking about, we can't help you. When they arrived, it was one of those things where it's just the only kind of question mark I have. So thank you, I appreciate it. I do actually have another question, if I can ask it while
the consulate guidance and that was actually quite useful. It was actually quite workable, and it was quite user friendly, if you like. So it was just the hassle really of having to go all the way to. I don't normally leave Brighton unless I have to, so you know it's. But yeah, we managed to get everyone there. It was actually, I think going to Edinburgh was the trickiest thing for maybe one of our touring parties. So, but you know, yeah, but it was fairly straightforward, to be honest.
Great.
Before we move on to the next questions, there were a couple of comments regarding this in the chat. So Lizzie from Mimbre was telling us that they didn't get the NIE numbers the 2 times they went to Spain. I don't think. And also Andrew was saying it's possible to get an NIE number from a Spanish consulate. It's been possible for years. I got one in 2012. Lizzie, the numbers you didn't get, were they for EU nationals or for UK nationals?
They were a mix. So 1 UK national and then 1 EU national and then 1 person with dual citizenship. I do think this entire summer, honestly, members slightly winged it. And I think we've maybe often got away with things that maybe we shouldn't have done, but because we're a really small show and it's just 3 women and like luggage. So I think sometimes we slipped under radars. But yeah, we didn't, and we got away with it. But interestingly as well, like the 2 festivals we went to in Spain, both of them wanted like completely different things, which are different again from what Ivan's just been talking about. So it's just like, even within one country, you could just have wildly different experiences at festivals that think different things are important. And I think that's really interesting.
Irene, do you have anything to add as our Spanish expert?
I was just going to say that because I was the person kind of asking all the consulates, do we really need to do these NIEs? Like, what's the actual point? Is anybody going to ask us about them? And actually, nobody got asked about these bloody NIEs, and it was a pain to organize and it cost money. But the advice from every single consulate was, you definitely need to get them. So it's one of those things where you decide, do you run the risk or not? And in this case, we didn't want to run the risk, and we were like, well, let's just get them done. And we were able to kind of support the companies, you know, who needed a bit of support to kind of cover some of the costs of travel for their team members to go to the consulates and to get all of that. Because I think it's that thing of you weigh it up, don't you? What's the risk sort of associated with it, and you decide if you want to take it or not. And then, yeah, once you get a NIE, it's sort of for life, but then you do have to have a renewed sort of license to use it, which is a lot more straightforward than getting the initial NIE once you do that. So yeah, we just followed what the consulates said that we needed to do, even if we knew that we were probably not going to be asked for it. That's what we decided to do.
I just wanted to respond to Andrew, your comment. I've heard that the NIE numbers do expire, or the certificates expire. Maybe the number doesn't. But yeah, I have been told that they're only valid for 6 months, the NIE certificates. But maybe the number stays with you for life. So there's a slight discrepancy.
It is and it doesn't. I know, because I've gone through this as well. So you still have your number, but the certificate says that it expires after 6 months. So you have to kind of go and get it renewed. I don't know what happens if you don't renew it. I didn't take that risk. Alice was asking what the NIE number is. It's basically a piece of paper with a number on it that the Spanish police, the Spanish government issues to European citizens, I guess, but also UK citizens, any non-Spanish citizen that wishes to work in Spain.
Maybe something to check is if it's valid or not for 6 months. I don't know, but I think if we went back next year, I would check that with the consulate. You can just email them and ask them. They do get back to you quite quickly.
And apologies, Alice, I know you've had your hands up for a bit. I just wanted to finish this conversation about the NIE Shall we move on to the next question? Yeah, go on, Alice then.
Thank you. Sorry for the lack of video, and I've got a toddler running around. I manage the show Spark, LED Drummers, and we are going back to, where are we going? We're going to Madrid for the 5th of January for the Three Kings Parade. We haven't been there since before we left the EU. So I'm just a little unsure as to what I need to do in addition to what I did before. We're only going to be performing for one day. We've not got carnets before. I've not had to look into NIE numbers before. No festival or booker or promoter has ever asked us for any of these things. Any suggestions?
Well, I think if you're shipping stuff out to the EU, whether it's for a gig or not, just any kit, as far as I'm aware, you're basically, you could get taxed on that going through. So you could, if you don't have a carnet and you try and take it over the border and they question it, you know, you'll just I think you have to pay tax on the spot of sorts. So the carnet just essentially allows you to export the stuff somewhere and then bring it back tax-free.
Sorry, when you say shipping?
Well, taking it over a border.
So just even if you have it in your luggage, if you have big drum boxes and you're flying with it or taking it in a van?
Yes. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's the problem. I've got all this kit, you know, these big pieces of things which are quite hard to hide. So you know, you can try and maybe take it through, but some people say it's easier just to pay the tax and take it through and then pay the tax on the way back. Depends on the value of things and the cost of the carnet. So you know, that's another way of doing it. I've also had other freight companies mention we were going to take stuff out to Australia potentially, and taking stuff when it's not with me, for instance, and I'm not sort of chaperoning it to the port and back again. Carnets can get lost. They can, you know, there can be all sorts of issues with the carnets. So unless someone that you know or you are taking it out, or it's a really good freighting company, yeah, the carnets can be a problem, but it just depends on your setup.
Sorry, you're always with our equipment, which is, I guess, where there's a slight difference here. We fly with, whether we're flying or yeah, we're always flying, to be fair. It's in our luggage, and then we have our drum cases, so it's slightly less obvious what we're transporting. The drum cases are probably less undercover.
I think there's different rules on musical instruments as well, like very specific rules on musical instruments. So whereas our stuff is very much just kit, there's quite specific rules on that, which I'm not up to date on, but definitely worth speaking to someone about, I think, if anyone else has any info.
Yeah, if anyone has any experience of, so we've got theatrical kit and musical instruments, so it's a real mix, but because we travel with mostly suitcases and then some drum cases.
We have a few comments in the chat if you want to check them afterwards. So Irene is able to send you a checklist of all the documents that you would need. And also there might be some restrictions on certain instruments if they have animal skins, which is something that you need to be aware of. Animal skin.
There is a difference, though, as you were saying, Alice, with whether you're traveling with your instruments or not. And I've just linked you to a couple of kind of resources that the Independent Society of Musicians have, which talk you through what that looks like and the difference. The only thing is whether you decide to have your instruments as kind of hand luggage, which you might not need to declare in an ATA carnet, and then have an ATA carnet for your theatrical set. That's kind of one of the things that you probably need to work through. But I've sent you a few links here, and I'll put it in the chat, in the general chat, in case it's useful for anybody else.
Thank you.
I think Lizzie might have something to add as well.
Yeah, for what it's worth, and again, this is in the land of like, maybe don't do what I do, we've done, but we travel, we have mats basically that are kind of come in like big bags, but we travel on planes with them as luggage, and we haven't got a carnet for those. And we say that, well, they are sports equipment and no one seems to be bothered. I don't know, I think theoretically it's for like stuff, but I mean, you know, like you're allowed to take stuff with you. So I think theoretically maybe you meant to have one, but actually we haven't had one and it's been fine. And we've deliberately been flying rather than driving to avoid having to get a carnet this year.
I think generally as a rule, from what people have told us, if you're driving, you're more likely to get checked. So it's more advisable to do a carnet. If you're flying and your equipment is clothes, mats, something that can easily go in a luggage, you can decide to take the risk and not do a carnet. If it's giant automated puppet lips, yeah, you definitely need a carnet for that.
Yeah, I would love a show where it was just me and a suitcase. That would be brilliant.
That's an idea for the next one.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
I hope this helped, Alice, but if you have any other questions, please get in touch with us. Fantastic. Anyone else would like to ask something or to give any advice about their experience?
I asked one of the other UK companies that we took to Spain to share some feedback, and they also shared a few questions. So I can maybe throw them in the mix here and see if anybody wants to answer them. So they were talking about the kind of excess costs due to Brexit for 4 gigs in the autumn, sort of coming up to £5,000 more or less. And that most of the extra costs were for extra paperwork required to travel and custom checks on the shipments for the ATA carnets. And they mentioned that they've actually looked into storing some of the artwork permanently in the EU and also setting up a business in the EU to overcome these obstacles. But unfortunately, these solutions are too expensive, either in terms of money or staff time to sustain them. So one of the things that they are doing at the moment, which might be something that people want to consider, especially if you've got sets and you might have 2 sets of sets, is they actually secured a 12-month carnet, like Ivan has done with the lips. And they agreed that one of the commissioning organizations in the EU was going to store it for 12 months. So they would be able to have that carnet for a whole year and for the set to be kind of in the EU for that year. So that's maybe something that when you're mapping out your partners, you might want to see if it's a possibility based on what you're doing. But some of the questions that they put as kind of wanting to hear about was, have you learned any tips, shortcuts or workarounds that you know of to help minimize shipping or storage costs? So one was obviously Ivan sharing freight with the other company, but I wondered if anybody else has any tips or anything that they've kind of done to mitigate that. Tom?
I don't know if it makes it easier, but we toured our show Wild so when we do indoor touring, we use a freight company. We use a company called Fly By Night, but it continually gets more and more expensive. Because our indoor touring is less extensive in what we have to take, we've been opting for driving it in our own vehicle, which we happen to have, which not all companies have, but that's the situation we're in. And we found that it reduces our costs to the point where next year we're going to try potentially to drive our indoor set to one of our venues, because it's much more cost effective for us to pay a driver separately and sort everything out separately. I think when you go with a freighting company, we've found that the costs mount quite a lot because everything becomes with a fee. Whereas if we're organizing certain things, the costs are within the company and within the people working in the company already. which I think helps minimize it, but it also creates a whole load of work. So it's one way or the other way, really, as far as what we've found with that. A tip what I found really useful is that we've connected with a company called Rocket Global, which is, they tour, I think like big events, really large scale concerts and stuff like this is kind of their main avenue. I've made a friend, Terry, Rocket Global, he's great. And having somebody whose job it is to know everything, who I can email and gets back to me quickly and can help me and I can call, is like an absolute lifesaver. And I definitely think it's worth the time to try and build a connection, because we then did IPA, the carnet through Terry, which is a 12-month carnet. It has 6 return journeys in the pages, and I think we're going to use all 6, and that came in at a cost. Granted, I think we were bringing less items than 116, did you say? So I think it's the cost, the number of items makes the cost increase because you're adding more pages. But I think ours came in at £450. So it was like far more reasonable to go through it that way. And when you're touring yourself, it gets a bit more complicated because you have to generate goods movement reference numbers for each journey and stuff like this, and talk about customs documents, and it becomes a bit more complicated than using a freighting company. But by having that connection, I could go, I've seen these 20 abbreviations related to freighting. Please, can you tell me what they all mean and which ones are applicable to me? And having somebody know what they were talking about was just incredibly useful to us, and means that we managed to, I think we did 6 countries outside of the UK this year. And so it's meant that we can carry on as a business doing the work that we were doing pre-Brexit.
Yeah, I think Rocket are a massive, they do huge stadium gigs and also, and they're really helpful. I think Dynamic Docs, there's a freighting part of their business as well. So I found them really useful with any questions. They weren't just carnets, they were freight logistics as well. So yeah.
I think there's quite a few companies, and there probably is different ones that work for different people. So it was just the first one that came up when I think on a Google search, and happened to find a nice person emailing me back, which was relief because it was very daunting at first. But yeah,
those sorts of companies, Rocket, they have huge warehouses all over the world where they store and hold a lot of kit between bands, gigs. I did a gig with Paul McCartney years ago, and the Rocket was integral to storing their stuff all around the world. So so it could be something like that as well. If you, I don't know, they might have a little corner in their warehouse where you can store stuff for a little while between gigs.
Going to call Terry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, that sounds great.
But they have big storage facilities, those types of companies.
I was also going to say, and I think that's a really important point that you raised there, Tom, in terms of being able to have a person of contact that can answer questions, because I think a lot of the questions that came through, some of the companies this year who were going to Spain, they were getting mixed messages and mixed advice from even their freight providers. So something that we found was extremely useful was to become members of the Institute of Export and International Trade. So you can have a kind of annual membership, and you get access to a helpline where you can ring them and ask them about specific questions you may have, and they always come back to you with a kind of written answer. I'll pop the link in the chat, and extracts are members at the moment, but you can be individual members, or you can have a membership as a kind of company. I think for companies it's about £300 a year, something like that. So it's definitely something that's worth it. And they also do sort of different trainings on specific topics. So obviously it's about trade in the widest sense, but it's one of those that you feel like, okay, they'll definitely know the answer and they'll give me the final kind of answer, you know. So I'll put that in the chat as well, because it's been so helpful for me.
That's great, and thank you everyone for your addition to the conversation. It's useful to hear different snippets from different people and different approaches, and definitely I feel like the more we do these sessions, the more it's about coming together and saying, okay, this thing worked for me, so maybe this thing is going to work for you too, because sadly there's not one answer or one size fits all in this situation we are now with Brexit, with different countries. And as Lizzie, I think, was saying before, even in the same country, different festivals might ask you for different things. So I think Ivan's approach was really good. He went through everything that was needed and didn't leave any box unchecked. So it was sure he had this peace of mind that I've done everything that is needed, even if the festival is only going to ask me for one form. So at least I know I've done my own work and I'll be safe. I have a question in the chat from Mo asking, if you drive yourself, do you need a separate carnet for each country you pass through, or does one cover the whole route? Does the border crossing in France do the same checks as the inland border facility? Irene, do you know?
I think my understanding, oh, Ivan, you go, because you will have done it more recently, but you go and then I can contribute.
My understanding of it is the one carnet, it depends where your carnet is valid for. So I have an EU carnet, but there's countries that it doesn't include, like Norway, and there's a few others. I don't think it includes Turkey and a few other places that are sort of in Europe. So it just depends on where you get the carnet issued for. So if it's worldwide, it'll cost you more. I did ask about a worldwide carnet, and it was going to be, I think, another 500 quid for the 12 months on top. In terms of the checks, so I think on the English side and on the French side, there's a border facility you have to go through. You have to get all the carnet then checked and stamped and all of that each way. So you have to go through the one in England, then the one in France, then you go off wherever you are, and then you come back through. You're re-importing that stuff into England, so you got to go through the French border facility, and then through the English one, and then back in. In terms of if you went to, so the stuff went through France and then down to Spain. So because of freedom of movement of goods, I think it was okay to go into another country unchecked with that carnet once it had entered into that economic zone. But I wonder if that is, yeah. So that's how I understand how it works. But maybe, I mean, you have some other thoughts.
Yeah, that's my understanding too. I think that the main thing to think about is you don't need to have a new carnet for the kind of countries you're going through, as long as they're all within your carnet allowance. What you do need to make sure is that you've got enough sheets in your carnet. So every time you get your carnet stamped, they take like a voucher out basically, and you need to make sure you've got enough to do your whole journey and then kind of come back. So that's one of the things that you need to make sure you've got kind of planned ahead when you're looking at the make of your carnet, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Thank you. I see Alice still has a hand up. I don't know if it's still from before, possibly. Yeah, maybe it was from before. Someone else raised their hand. Was it Tom? Yes, go on.
Sorry, it's me again. As I understand, you can add pages to your carnet as well. So you wouldn't need to start back at the beginning because you've just used all your trips in 4 months out of 12 months. So you can add more. And we had when I was speaking to Terry, I was telling him that we were going to Spain, but every time we went over, we went UK to France. And so that was the journey we were doing the customs for and all of that. And as Ivan said, it was all, once you're in freedom of movement, it's fine, as I understand. So I agree with everybody.
I agree with everybody. It sounds like a perfect way to finish this session. We are getting to the end of our time, so if that's fine with you, I will just wrap up. Thank you, everyone, for attending this session today, and we hope you found it fruitful. Thank you particularly to Ivan for sharing their experience with us. We are planning to do more dealing with Brexit sessions, which we'll share on our website and our mailings in the coming weeks. If you would like to share your own experience at one of our future sessions, or if you know of someone who has an interesting story to tell, please do get in touch with us. Finally, we have just launched a survey to gather evidence on touring post-Brexit. The aim of having this data for us is to be able to make the case for continued support and legislation change where needed. And we would really appreciate you taking the time to fill it in before the 10th of December. My colleague Irene is going to put the link to this chat, the link to the survey in the chat now. As mentioned earlier, we also have further Brexit resources available on our website, extracts.org.uk. And finally, before you close your Zoom, please do answer a couple of questions that will pop up on your screens that will only take a second to do, and it's really useful for us to gather your feedback. Thank you, everyone, once again, and we do hope to see you again soon.